So we are ready to continue with the last session, which is the open discussion panel. We have Jarno Elovirta, Robert Anderson, and Roger Shin. Okay. So how do you want to start, Robert? Should we?
I think we say go.
Go. So,
but more seriously, if there are any questions, raise your hand. George will run to you as fast as he can. If there are no questions, we'll try to come up with some, ask them of ourselves, see how good our answers are.
Okay. So we had the first question.
A question compared to what we have seen last year. Jarno presented something about the data generator, for customizing PDF plugin. Is it still maintained or is it?
Well, I haven't had time to look at the code for a year. That's the problem with having multiple projects. You at some point run out of time. I would really like to maintain it and make it better, but DITA 1.3 took all my resources, and then there are some more interesting things like the server bit and so forth. So it's maintained when I get to it.
But it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
And it still generates customizations up to toolkit version.
You can select 2.0, I know. I don't know about beyond that, but I just
Okay, so it has a bug that I should fix. I know I'm a bottleneck, but I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. Sorry.
So try to have questions, like not in the front and then in the back.
And if anybody wrote down a question on a card, are those anywhere? I don't know if those got collected or if
incremental
wrote
questions.
one down. But I will also add, I used the plugin generator just a month or two ago to do something that worked fine with 2.1, and so as far as I know, it's working well.
Yeah, I guess this one might be for Jarno. Last year, I was asking about the possibility to get the size, the width, basically, of an image. And you said you had it on a branch, and is that now going to be in 2.2? Or?
So right now there's image metadata task in pre-processing. I don't remember if you need to enable it or disable it. Like, for example, PDF, I think, runs it by default. So it adds new attributes to the image element in a DITA-OT namespace, and it has the height, width, vertical and horizontal pixel size, or DPI. So it adds some information. Not all file formats are supported. It doesn't support, for example, SVG, but it could be made to support more image formats.
Okay, so, but things like PNG, that would be okay?
Those should work.
Yeah.
Although there are some cases where you have a PNG that's using some weird color scheme, so those might not work. You might need to install some additional libraries.
Okay, so basically the word is tested, and
yeah,
okay, all right.
So basic support should be there.
Okay.
It would be nice to read more image metadata, but it only makes sense to read the metadata if you're actually going to use it somewhere. And then, of course, you'd need to extend it to read video files and all sorts of things.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Great. The second question, a very simple one, just about the migration path. So we're currently on 1.8.5. So if we wanted to move to 2.2, would we have to do it stepwise, or can we go directly? Or, so, how's it going to work?
I would suggest moving at once. Like, I wouldn't suggest using 2.0 and 2.1. You would probably, at this point, just have to progress through the release notes for your updates. But yeah, I wouldn't stop in the middle and try to get things working too well, or start using that one.
Just raise your hand.
So I want to return to something that was said earlier in the day about, there was, I can't remember if it was your talk, Robert, about having, instead of overloading a trans type with lots of different arguments, was that yours?
Yes.
All right. So from a CCMS perspective, user interface perspective, we would like to present to the user a really simple type of situation where they select the map and maybe a layout option and an output type and an OpenToolkit version, and then go. Does that, in your view, does that mean that we should have a proliferation of trans types underneath the covers, or should we be overloading? Well, my sense would be to overload the transform.
I think it's a balance. And the reason I put it up there as an anti-pattern is because I went too far towards having too many parameters. Because it never occurred to me that the transform type, in a toolkit sense, is just another parameter. And so I had one transform type. No matter what kind of HTML you wanted, no matter what flavor, you went and selected HTML, and then you selected from among 20, and then 30, and then 40 options. And it got ridiculous. And so in terms of presenting something simple to the user, I eventually began to realize, it's like, to get this format of HTML working, you had to select, like there's a mandatory, you have to select at least these 3 options and give them specific values, and then select your other options. And at some point it's just becomes, we have one transform because we've always just thought of it as HTML. Why don't we just say HTML for this guy? And all those things are pre-selected, or HTML for this platform. And so there's certainly a balance, because if you're supporting, I'm supporting, I don't know how many teams our users are divided up into, but I'm just going to say 100 different teams. I can't have one GUI that has 100 different XHTML transforms, one for each team. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's gone too far the other way. But if you can have, maybe one transform for each brand in IBM, you've got 5 or 6. HTML for this brand, HTML for this brand, and then on top of that, they select a few options that they want to use that are the common options. I think there's a balance. In some cases, depending on your scenario, you may be able to just have 3 different PDF transforms, 4 different HTML transforms, and that's it. That's all you ever select. And that, I would say, is incredibly simple, because you never have to worry about any other options. But yeah, if you end up at 20, 30, 50, you've gone too far. So yeah, there's a balance. I don't know what that balance is.
So one take on this is that if you have a single PDF type and then gazillion different parameters, at some point you need to validate that the combination is valid. So like this brand to this organization, you can only send them US letter, never A4. So you have to decide where you want to maintain the information, which combinations are valid. A trans type is a convenient place to have those, because you can basically hard code the moving bits that the end user shouldn't change. That way you might be more secure in that they're not producing some combination that will then immediately be sent back by the customer saying the page size is wrong, just because it was possible for the author to change that.
One more thing that related to that, I said that you had a particular flavor of XHTML where you had to select 3 different options. We also had to document it to say, when you're going to this output, you have to use these 3 options. Also, no matter what you specify for these 5 options, I ignore them because they don't matter. But they're available because it's the XHTML transform. It's the common thing. And so it got ridiculous.
I think one thing that's helpful to understand is that plugins can not only customize the default plugins that are provided with the toolkit, but custom plugins can also extend other custom plugins. So if you have in your organization a baseline of common customizations that apply to everyone, you can create a custom plugin for that, and then create other custom plugins that just have the deltas. So for a lot of my clients, I end up doing that and have basically the one thing that gives them their corporate branding, and then they get another 2 or 3 custom plugins for the A5 output versus the PA4 output that fits on all sorts of page sizes and things like that. And those other customizations are really trivial because they may contain 2 or 3 other parameters, but most of it is being done in one other place. So you don't need to really duplicate all of the customization to have 6 different plugins. You can have most of it in one, and then there's 2 or 3 that make a couple of tiny changes. So.
Okay. Elliot.
This question goes back to a discussion that we were having in the hall earlier, which is what are the plans, if any, for support for cross-document linking in the OpenToolkit?
When someone gets round to it. So I don't have current plans to implement it, but hopefully it will be in 2.3, because at that level we would finalize the DITA 1.3 support. So after 2.3, we would be able to then start breaking things again and go with version 3. What we would break, that's another thing I don't know yet.
Yeah, so 2 quick things on top of that. One, talking to Sven earlier, there's already at least some prototypes out there that get partway towards cross-document linking, and so it would be great to have those discussions start now. You know, here are some ideas to at least get started, and maybe we can build on that, and that makes it just more likely that it'll be in 2.3. The other thing, breaking things. I'm surprised no one had asked that yet, because I think last year we talked about 2.0 breaking things, and that was, I think, the first and most common question throughout the day. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you breaking? What are you doing? So yeah, Jarno mentioned earlier that 3.0 will break things. And I believe you said break everything or change everything. I know that's always his goal starting out, but he said the same thing with 2.0. And from the hands raised earlier, a lot of you have managed to move to 2.0 or 2.1 or maybe even 2.2. I doubt anyone's on 2.2 yet. I would be very impressed if you were. But assuming you made that move, it probably didn't break so much that you found it unusable or had too much trouble. A lot of that breakage is on those edge cases, the things that we don't think anyone uses, but we can't know for sure. Removing extension points where we no longer think those are appropriate, and we don't think anyone's using them. So that's the kind of thing that is likely to break. Other things can potentially break. Now that we have Roger involved much more heavily than he was leading up to 2.0, I'm sure that anything that is broken will be documented with migration info, depending on the rest of us letting him know.
So the problem with knowing what to break, I'd say something like 99.9% of DITA plugins are behind some corporate firewall, and we have absolutely no visibility to them. So because DITA and OpenToolkit, they're sort of enterprise level products. No normal person uses them, which means the open source community doesn't really use it, which means we can't see other people's customizations and plugins because they're not in GitHub. They're in private GitHub or some company SVN. So it's actually quite difficult for us to know what people are using. If you want, and this is an option, we can add a feature to OpenToolkit that every time you run the integrator, OpenToolkit will call home and send all the information to our website. So then
I don't understand why they're all laughing.
Yeah. So it'll send all the information that is there. So we'll have excellent picture what you have. It even might send all your plugins. But I think the IT departments would probably blacklist OpenToolkit after that. So OpenToolkit can never call home. We can never send user statistics or something like that. So we're just stuck in a situation where people use it, but we don't know how. We could, of course, create some sort of script that analyzes your plugins and creates a single file that describes what's in there, and then you can review the information that's in there, and you can submit it somewhere. But only 1% or 0.5% would do that. Probably not even that many people. So I'd like to break things, and hopefully nothing bad happens.
I know it sounds preposterous to call home, but like Drupal is also enterprise, and we do call home. It's an opt-out, so you can opt out from it. But if you want to get security updates, like information about the security of your plugins and stuff like that, then you better leave it on. And a lot of people leave it on, and that's how we know how many modules are used by whom. Well, no, we don't know whom, but we know how many modules are used out there in the community. So I would like, you can always make it opt out.
Question to the audience. I mean, how many of you are willing to accept breakage in things that you very likely don't use in order for Jarno to make the toolkit a lot better? The way I put that question, I was hoping everyone would raise their hand, and we only got like a third. That terrifies me. It's like you don't want us to change things that you never use, just in case. But it means we're stuck, and that's what's held Jarno back, and that's what I think has frustrated Jarno over the years. That there are things that we'd like to change that might rapidly speed up processing or make things much more efficient. And I've often been one of the people holding him back because of the backwards compatibility. But there are definitely places where I think no one can be using this or should be using this. And I think those are the ones more likely to disappear in 3.0. You can always roll back. Yes. The problem is that if we remove something like that, even if we document it and say, this is going away, here it is, it's gone, you don't need it, and this is why, the one person who uses it is going to be really pissed, and they're going to be on DITA users within 5 minutes. And yeah, that's all.
So I may be the only toolkit developer, or toolkit plugin developer that actually had hard breakage from the move from 1.8.5 to 2.0. Because I had implemented pre-processing extensions that depended on the names of specific ant tasks that were either removed or changed in 2.0. Now, thanks to Radu, who figured out how to fix it, I know how to get around that. I'll deal with it. But that's just out of that experience, and in anticipation of things like that happening to a greater degree with the 3.0 release, I would be very enthusiastic about a 3.0 that gives Jarno and everybody else, carte blanche to do whatever they want, as long as the 2.0 branch continued to be maintained. And I know the challenge with the 1X versus 2.0 is, the 3 men on the stage are, the majority of the development resources, right? And asking them to maintain 2 branches at the same time, in the face in particular of implementing all the 1.3 features, would have been unrealistic and unreasonable, and they, I think reasonably refused to do it. But in a 3.0 time frame, we definitely need to think carefully if there's a way that we can, and by what means I have no idea what that might be, make it possible to maintain these 2 branches, 2.x and 3.x over time, so that companies that have, a pretty deep investment in 2.x plugins, don't have to worry too much about them, aging out 5 years after the last 2.x release. And you guys can go on and do the 3.0 stuff.
I think that'll partly depend on how much actually ends up being changed.
Yeah.
I mean, if we remove extension points, but you can easily replace it with another, then we can have a document that says, here's how you switch to the new extension point. And I will say I have extended pre-processing in the past, much to Jarno's chagrin. And so I've had to change things over time. But typically it's been very minor.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge that I had in the context of DITA for publishers is that I have to maintain support for 1.x in the stuff I deliver. So then now I'm faced with maintaining 2 different builds, 2 different delivery branches, which Being as I'm only one person, you know, that I don't have the resources to you know, it ultimately becomes a resource problem, not a technical problem, but, you know, it's the reality of our environment, right?
It's sort of, I think how we would do it is that once 3.0 is out, we would still release some bug fix releases to 2.x, but maintaining it, just hire me, I'll do it for you, just by the hour, or, well, not probably by the hour, by the month. So it can be maintained, but usually it requires money to do something like that. Everything can be fixed with money. Unfortunately, when you don't have that, then you're stuck with the situation that if the main project decides to go forward and they don't have the resources to maintain 2 branches and support all the possible users, then some versions become abandoned, and right now we're not planning on releasing anything in the 1.x branch. It's in GitHub, you can clone it, you can do it whatever you want with it, but we don't have the resources to support those people using it. But if someone wants to do it, please come in and help us maintain all the versions, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, I think we did release a 1.8 fix after 2.0 came out, like when, maybe even 2 of them. So there have been maintenance releases, but certainly no new features. Like if there's a big new feature coming in, it's going to be in the new release. We just want to see George go back and forth.
Yeah, sure.
So, and just some history, because I don't want it to sound like I'm complaining. I mean, one of the challenges with the move from 1.8.5 to 2.x was also support for DITA 1.3 features, right? And the decision was made, I think rightly, to only put 1.3 features officially in 2.x, right? So that meant there was no reason to add new features to 1.8.5 at all. In a 2.0, 3.0 timeframe, that condition's not going to hold, right? There's not going to be a new version of DITA anytime soon. So now it's simply, it can be entirely about the functional and implementation details of the toolkit. The functionality that it's supporting in terms of the DITA standard will be unchanged for certainly the next 5 years, right? So it's somewhat a different analysis in terms of resources and needs and what do you support and what do you not support.
I just want to start by thanking all of you for all that you do for all of us on your free time. It's really incredible. Thank you. Yeah. And
I will point out, but Jarno does more of this on free time than any of us, I think.
I know, and
Yeah.
I can't look at a schematron file without smiling. Thank you for that too. It's amazing, and thank you for the docs. I've already looked at GitHub and I've been really amazed at the improvements. So thanks. So my question is sort of, there's the idea that we can always back out, but that's actually not true for enterprise use of like third-party products like XML. Like we use XML. So what happens there is you order your upgrade and you get XML's customized version of the OpenToolkit, and you start to integrate your own customizations into that version, and then you find out that one of those extension points is gone, and you have a really bad couple of weeks. So it's not where folks who are using the native toolkit can back out. We can't. But I totally appreciate that you want to be able to go forward. So I'm wondering actually if there could almost be like an emergency mailing list of, because I actually came across your like your note, I can't stand start command, can we get rid of it? And maybe if there was like a low mail emergency email list, I'm going to blow away start command. If you have a problem with that, let me know.
Yeah, so there are a couple of thoughts there, and I've already lost track of at least one of them. But anyway, there is a developer list, DITA-OT dev. It's in Google Groups, low traffic. I post to it every month with our contributor calls with the minutes, which again, anyone who wants to join, even in listen-only mode, just let me know and I'll add you to the invitation for the GoToMeeting. Synchrosoft supports that. They run the GoToMeeting. It's GoToMeeting, right? Yeah. So that's a list that is intended for development level questions. So there's that. Oh, the other thing, in terms of you're getting a vendor product, they've already customized it. You're putting your customizations on top of that. One thing I might suggest is ask your vendor to attend those calls. Ask your vendor to be in touch with us, to be aware of what's changing. A lot of vendors don't. Even in the past, I'm certainly not going to call any out here, but there have been vendors where I've explicitly talked to them and say, I know you're customizing, I know you have fixes, can we get those back? And sometimes I don't get a response, sometimes I get a whole year's worth of, yeah, we'll do it. And yeah, so there have been vendors who've done that. If you have issues like that, in particular where it's a customization on top of customization, ask your vendor about that, if they know what's going on.
There may not be a new version of DITA coming up soon, but what about lightweight DITA? Do you see any impact of that on the toolkit?
So once Michael and the rest finish with it, we can implement it. They just have to define what lightweight DITA is. Because if lightweight DITA is a subset of DITA, it should be then just a matter of configuring the DTDs and other schema files, and that's it. It should work. If they're not going to make it a subset, but rather a subset plus something, then that's a problem. But then it's not, well, I don't know what their plans are.
Yeah, and we don't know because it's not done yet, but the intent has been to make it a subset. And so in that case, it's not really much different than if you were to create your own constrained DTD that cuts out 90% of the elements and features. The ones you use are supported just like they've always been. The other stuff just doesn't get activated.
So the Markdown plugin that I wrote, I talked a lot with Carlo Sevilla from the Lightweight DITA working group, and he gave his feedback on it and vice versa. So we're already sort of collaborating on it. And that's one of the ideas, that DITA doesn't have to be XML. And then next, I suppose, then should be the HTML lightweight DITA, which I don't really understand, but maybe Michael will be able to explain it to me, because I think HTML is an awful authoring language. For consumption, it's really nice. The whole world uses it. But authoring HTML, yeah. But if I find something silly, it doesn't mean it won't get implemented.
Maybe someone could make a constraint plugin for Oxygen for better. Maybe someone could make a constraints plugin for HTML5 so that we can author HTML5 in a proper way in Oxygen.
Yeah, I mean, the idea I had that if you have, I don't know what the lightweight DITA HTML looks like. I don't know if it even exists yet. So you'd probably have data-something attributes like data-conref that has the conref information in there. We have associated JavaScript that resolves the conref on load, like doing that.
I think there is no support for conref in lightweight DITA.
Okay, brilliant. So it's simple. So it's almost done, because it's so simple. Chris had a question, right?
Really just a comment based on the goals for lightweight DITA, given that one of our driving forces for developing lightweight DITA is to ease implementation by vendors and by toolsmiths to make it easier for people to adopt DITA. I don't think we're going to build anything that's going to be horribly difficult to implement in the toolkit.
Yeah, I just want to mention that there are these ideas of lightweight something, TI simple. It's also a new specification for TI, so they are also trying to get some simple level. And I think the dogbook also has a kind of simplified part. And also on the using different other formats, I was at the TI meeting and they were also considering, like defining an abstract model away from XML, and then having XML as one possible implementation of that. Just to have an idea, that within the XML community, there is, you can find, what we do with DITA also in other parts. I have one question. That I like the relaxing G part of DITA 1.3. So I was wondering what will do the DITA OpenToolkit with respect to that? I mean, will the DITA OpenToolkit support the relaxing schemas directly? And what happens with the Elliott converter project from relaxing G to DTDs and XML schema? Because from my point of view, it would be really nice to have, to check out one project and have everything there to manage specialization constraints and convert, to different schema formats and so on. So that's
So we have a hard dependency on Xerxes, just because it's the only XML parser I've seen that allows you to cache the grammar files. I mean, there are other fast XML parsers, but then you get into a situation when you need to use the grammar files, it becomes slow because they reload them every time. So in a way, we have a hard dependency on Xerxes. And Xerxes would allow us to plug in the RNG validation. So I should...
Actually, it will be also Jing, the relaxing G validator. So you will need also that added to the...
Yeah.
To the
so I think it would be 2.3, not 4. No, 2.3 release, not 3.0. So it should come soonish. Whether it will be sort of something that is really built in or whether it's a plugin, that depends. We'll see what makes most sense from software development point of view. Because we have to think about this as a piece of software that someone develops. We can't just throw something in there just because someone asked for it. It needs to make sense.
Well,
even if it is George asking.
Yeah.
Because DITA 1.3 will have the relaxing schemas as the normative, reference schemas, and before that, DTDs were the normative schemas, and they were included with the OpenToolkit.
Yeah, and using relaxing also is a good idea because it allows us probably to validate the non-XML content that comes in, like from Markdown. Haven't checked that out yet.
Okay, Elliot?
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So I have a question for the audience as well. As we focus on making decisions about where we expend our efforts, one of the things that concerns me is the documentation is how do you use the documentation? So we currently produce, let's say, at least 4 different formats of that stuff. So it lives on the project website online. We produce an HTML output that goes into the distribution packages. There is a PDF that goes into the distribution packages, and there's an HTML help file, the CHM. So I'd just like a kind of quick show of hands. If you look at the DITA-OT documentation, which format do you look at? So who looks at the project website? I like that number of hands. How many look at the static HTML in the distribution package? Yes, very good. How many of you open the PDF that comes with the distribution package? Okay. And how many the HTML help, the CHM file? Great, thank you. That tells us something. That's probably also a good question. Yes, how many look at the DITA source of the documentation? Yeah, okay. I like the way your brains work. Okay, great. That gives us some sense of where we need to invest our effort in making a documentation better. Of course, it's coming from the same source files, but we also want to think about where to invest effort in making the output better, and that helps us to understand where most effort is best justified. So thanks.
Just to touch back on George's question about the relaxing G stuff. As far as the RNGDTD conversion goes, there's still a few rough edges I need to sand off of that. Once I do, it's packaged as an OpenToolkit plugin, so of course it can just be installed. Whether that is appropriate to integrate into the main OpenToolkit package or not, that's really up for Robert and Jarno to determine. But that once I feel like I've got that working well enough that it can be generally used, it will certainly be available there.
Robert, let's have a dialogue. So I want to remove all the default plugins. So OpenToolkit would come with the base plugin and nothing else, and you would just install the plugins you need. I want it to be clean and empty. No. That's the discussion we had, replayed to you. So I come from the land of developers where you don't really get anything. You need to install everything yourself. So you define what you want to do, and then you see what's out there, and then you use it. DITA comes with batteries, and some people feel that the batteries it comes with are the ones that you should be using. Like we have multiple different ways of producing PDFs. PDF2 is now the one that's bundled with OpenToolkit, and it might not be the best one. So I think, to get my meaning?
I do. I don't know about the audience. I will say I come from a slightly different background where I support all the users in IBM who, and I see there's a question in just a moment. I support all the users in IBM who expect everything to be working when they open the box. And if they open it up and they try to run the XHTML that they ran last week with the old version, and it says there's no such thing as XHTML, they're going to be angry, and they don't want to take extra steps. And so all the things that are used by 95% of the people, I think, should stay in there. I understand the purist perspective of it would be nice if you download and maybe there's even a GUI that says, these are the things I want, and they're added in automatically. I understand that, but I don't think that that works well with our current community. I will say the bar has gotten much higher for adding new plugins since Jarno really got involved, really for that reason, that so many things are viewed as, not everybody needs this, so it shouldn't clutter up the package.
Maybe, sorry, just to follow up before that, maybe you can have, I think Eclipse also has like a full package, tuned for a specific usage, like enterprise or developing, and then, and then they have also a basic core package, so that may be an option to provide like a couple of distributions, one with the default packages and one with just the skeleton, the core part.
It is an option, but I think everybody was happy when we went away from shipping 3 different packages and started just shipping the one. We had minimal, standard, and full easy install, and I think nearly everybody got the full easy install, and often people would get the others and then say, why isn't start command there? So I think going to one package so you don't have to make that choice in advance was good, but yes, on to that question.
Maybe it's an option to build something like an OpenToolkit generator. So that would be a possible solution for understanding which plugins are used by the users. So this would be trackable. You don't have to track the toolkits running on the users' machines, but you can track the usage of the generator.
Okay, so there's one option we could do, is that OpenToolkit would come with basically no plugins. Then when you write DITA-F HTML5, it would say HTML5 isn't installed. Here's the command line how to install it, and we'd be able to do it if we just listed those, and then in a way install on demand, but I don't know, not sure.
The analytics for that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about having a repository for plugins, similar to what, for example, Maven has. But the problem is who would maintain it, because if person X submits a plugin to the repository, I don't have time to test it thoroughly so it doesn't contain malware, because I'm assuming someone would put something malicious there with a name and description that would make everyone install it immediately. So the curation is that's a problem. So you'd need to keep the bad actors out. You can solve it, for example, by creating the system that allows you to install based on a repository somewhere, but then you wouldn't have a default repository, or the default repository that we would have would be the current built-in plugins that we actually know that are safe and of some quality. And then you would be able to say, I want to use the other repository in this URL, like you do with Maven. You can have multiple repositories, and then you just pull it from the one that you find it in. That's one option. We haven't taken that yet because it's extra work. We haven't had time.
Elliot.
So I have a totally different question. What is the status of support for having direct URIs as the input to the toolkit instead of files? Is that still in progress or in plan, or is it already there?
You can use a URL as the input argument, and it will start retrieving it from the URL. For example, you can go to GitHub and click on the raw button there. It shows you the actual file, not the GitHub GUI around it, and then give it as the argument for OpenToolkit, and OpenToolkit will start fetching the files. It's slow because it's fetching each file at a time, and it's not been optimized to keep the connection open, but in the future we may or should do it. But it's working. We don't have configuration options for the URI resolvers, so you'd be able to do something like you have a custom resolver for a CMS where the custom resolver caches the content and generates part of the content during the request, like inserts metadata and so forth. We don't have custom resolvers yet, but that's the next logical step. You can't give a DITA-val path as a URI that is somewhere outside your local machine. That would just need to be done. But processing DITA-vals is kind of a different path from normal processing, so I haven't implemented that yet. Images work, yeah.
Speaking as a CCMS vendor, when someone buys our product, and I assume our competitors feel the same, they see a system and they don't understand the difference between the CCMS and the DITA-Open Toolkit when it comes to composition. They just see a slow running process, particularly with PDF. And when we do the timings on it, you know, the storage piece of that might be a fraction of a second for the actual export of the data, whereas the composition time spent by the Open Toolkit is orders of magnitude larger. So I really like the idea of DITA 3.0, DITA Open Toolkit 3.0, ripping out and changing a lot of things, because if those changes include optimizations in processing, that helps us not only sell, but helps us with customers who are making migrations, say, from a FrameMaker-based process where they do rendering on the local machine and it's kind of fast, and now they get server-based processing of an Open Toolkit, like what you saw with XCsoft or like what we do. And I'm certain that other vendors of our class do the same sort of thing with comparable composition times.
with those timings that you were doing, is that 1x toolkit or 2.0? Because that's changed significantly. That's one of the reasons to upgrade to 2.0 is PDF is now much faster than it was before.
Well, certainly with 1x, that was our experience. Well, our customers upgrade to 2x based on their willingness to pay the fees to their style sheet developers to upgrade to 2x. It's not a function of Astoria, but I would think that any type of improvement in the processing time would go towards a greater good.
Yeah, and we can make it even better by moving some of the processing in a way that we process all the map-related content first and then start dealing with topics once everything in the map is done to the level that we can do it. Then if you filter out a large chunk of your map, you wouldn't unnecessarily retrieve those resources, because it's a problem that a CMS has to sort of crawl all the links, create a humongous zip file, stick it somewhere, and then OT uses only a fraction of it because of the filtering. So that's something that might help there.
Most CCMS vendors do that. They have upstream filtering. I would think most CCMS vendors have that upstream filtering so that before the files are actually exported, they're already giving you the minimal set.
Yeah, I've used one that didn't do it.
Well, except for that one.
I think an opportunity for optimization will be also if you can reuse the same pre-processing part, because now if you have, for the same deliverable, you go to multiple formats, I don't think you can reuse all the processing part, right?
There are some things that the pre-processing may do depending on the output type, but of course you can create some set of information that tells the thing that is running OpenToolkit whether to reuse those already processed files. I know it could be done. There are no major issues with it. It's just right now it's not being done. I don't know how many of you produce multiple different outputs at the same time, like same time. Okay, some, most, some.
I'll just mention, coming out of last year, one of the changes that happened as a direct result of this conference, thanks to George having it again, one of the things we noticed with all the talk about documentation last year, which was of course a big thing, everybody wants the documentation. We were putting up all the links to this long, complicated URL, DITA-OT, GitHub, IO, something, something, something. And I realized at some point around the end of the conference that maybe no one had grabbed the domain DITA-OT.org, and wouldn't that make sense? And I went home and registered it before Jarno could, and I think he's been annoyed ever since. So that's one of the things that made me happy as an outcome that wasn't specifically asked for, but was a direct result of this conference last year. I had that realization, and I love the fact that we can just point people now to DITA-OT.org, and I like that.
And we have DITA-OT.com for the commercial version of OpenToolkit, which doesn't exist, but if we ever decide to come up with a commercial version.
I suspect that if Jarno decides to go into business with a commercial version of the OT, I will sell him that domain for quite a profit.
Thank you. Dita.io is also taken.
No more questions?
Discussion? Because we talk all the time in Slack and occasionally on the phone, so we don't really have that much to talk right now because we've already spoken everything.
That is one point in terms of getting involved. I mean, we always want to encourage people to get involved. Hopefully that message has come across here. Submit issues, submit pull requests, submit ideas. However you want to get involved, get involved. One thing, if you'd like to participate in more of the actual discussions or at least follow along, we do have a Slack group for those of you who are familiar with slack.org.com, something. I don't know, Slack. It's the big new thing that everyone's using, and so are we. So that's where a lot of our design discussions take place. Well, all of them, yeah. All the ones that aren't actually in an issue at GitHub, that's where we're chatting about it. And so you can follow along. I know there are people in this room that are members of that and maybe check in once in a while or seem to be online a lot, even if you don't participate. You don't have to chime in on all these discussions, but you can watch them happening. If it interests you at all, please join. Oh, another question from Elliot, or maybe a comment.
One moment.
So I'm a huge fan of Slack, and I'm one of those people there. But one of the things that Slack gives you is you can subscribe to the channel that will tell you when anything is committed to GitHub. So, for example, you know if you have an interest in knowing what the minute-by-minute changes to the code are, Slack makes it's just like the best way to get that information because it's just the right amount of interruption.
Yeah, just make sure if you install the phone app, don't set it to notify you for the development channel.
Exactly.
Because with the frequency with which Jarno commits and people comment on issues, it will be ding, ding, ding. Yeah,
no, don't do that, yeah.
I think that lasted, yeah. I think that lasted about 5 minutes on my phone before I figured out how to turn that off. So.
No, no problem. I'll think for a moment.
Okay.
After all this, I just want to ask again, who's willing to accept minor breakage and things you never use in order to rapidly increase processing performance? That's a lot better. Good. Our work here is done. So we have a successful outcome from today. That's one of my goals, is to convince everybody today. That's a good thing.
So this isn't an announcement, just what I think of the future. So XHTML, the transformation type, will become abandonware. I have no plans of updating it anymore. Every new feature that goes into HTML will be in HTML5 trans type. They're still reusing code, so HTML5 is based on XHTML, the plugin, but at some point it'll change. We'll remove that dependency, and HTML5 will no longer depend on it and will start to live its own life. And yeah, XHTML is abandonware because the world decided XHTML isn't a good thing. Ages ago, it took a while for people producing something from DITA to catch on, but all the new interesting things will be in HTML5, and I think the goal would be to make it quite easily extendable. But for example, with styling, we'll actually start providing Sass files instead of CSS, and you can just build your CSS, just because it makes sense from web developer point of view. Web developers do a lot of things differently from how it seems people creating stuff from DITA do.
Maybe there's a good tie-in there also. It allows us to modularize the CSS in much the same way that the XML vocabularies are modularized. So CSS itself didn't support that, but as we move to Sass, we can do things like create a module that would style each of the elements in a particular vocabulary domain or something like that. And we've done that for some of the newer ones. So there's one for XML mention and things like that, where we can inherit things from one to the other, so that we can say everything in this domain gets these properties and this particular element gets a different one. And because those are all just sort of one-line import statements somewhere else, it makes it much easier to pull in new things. And that doesn't need to be scary at all. It's already there in the HTML5 plugin now. So it's still outputting the same common left to right CSS that you've always known and probably not loved. But under the hood, it's being generated in a totally different way now already. And so in the future, all we need to do, or all you would need to do, if you would like to, let's say, implement your corporate branding or something like that, or this pull-in bootstrap styling or something like that, is add a one-line import to the existing CSS frameworks that you're already using, and that'll make that much easier.
Just one comment on that. I mean, XHTML5 was interesting maybe from the perspective of a post-processing stage. And HTML5 allows you to serialize also well-formed XML. So I'm just hoping that, you know, that will not be, will be still well-formed XML what will generate.
Yeah, the world decided XML is bad, or all the web developers in the world decided XML is bad. Then all the other developers decided XML is bad because they were ruined by SOAP and other misuses of or abuses of XML. So the world hates XML. I don't hate it. It's just that there are places where it's more suited, and since HTML is really only consumed by browsers, and browsers implement the HTML5 parsing algorithm that can take either one. The browsers don't really care, but right now HTML5 output is HTML5, not XHTML5, or the HTML5 XML format. But it is actually quite easy to change to be the XML version of HTML.
I mean, there are cases when you want some post-processing after that, so.
Also, the EPUB specifications mandate use of XHTML, so you cannot build EPUB anymore with that.
Of course, I don't want to say too bad, but right now the plan is to focus on HTML5. Some things might be actually easy to retrofit to HTML, XHTML, but we'll see.
Well, it's not a big problem. I mean, you can still put an HTML to XHTML stage and do that processing, but you know, just.
And he's called it abandonware. He's not interested in it. I still have a lot of people who use it. My customers in IBM are definitely moving to HTML5, but we have a whole lot built on XHTML. And so in terms of maintenance, that's something I'm still working on. So it's not entirely abandoned.
I want to loop back to something that Roger was talking about in his lightning talk. I'm involved in the Finnish Tech Comms Association. And one of the talks that we have is about how new people enter the field and, for example, would get involved with OpenToolkit and customization. I saw that you had a bullet point on training in your lightning talk, Roger, if you remember. Training material, sort of, I'm just thinking, just totally off the top of the topic of the conversation so far, but how do we bring new people in to our community and sort of try to outreach to people who are entering the tech comms field and, you know, sell them the message and evangelize that they should really sort of dive in.
Okay, I think the bullet point that you're referring to was one where I suggested that we would devote some effort to creating a dedicated tutorials section. Yes, and that was something that Jarno has been advocating for. We do have a lot of task-based content throughout the documentation already, so it's not like we don't have any tutorials. And I think a lot of those were things that Chris developed. So Chris, if I understand correctly, spent a good bit of effort taking some things that had been reference topics and other things and making task topics out of them to make it clearer, you know, what the step-by-step process is. But we've noticed that some of those topics maybe are not quite so visible to people because they're embedded elsewhere within the document hierarchy, which we'd like to simplify a little bit. And so to promote and surface some of that step-by-step content and make it more easily discoverable, Jarno had the idea that we might do well to have a tutorial section that may bundle some of the existing task topics that we have, but also add new task topics. So that's on the docs issues tracker. That is an issue that's up there with a help wanted tag. And any of you that have extra time on your hands and would like to contribute some documentation to the DITA Open Toolkit, that's something that I can recommend. That help wanted tag means we know we need to do this but haven't found the time yet. Help wanted means you can submit a whole topic, but that also might mean just add a comment to that issue that says, hey, I'd really like a tutorial on this topic. If you can't write it, okay, but if we know someone's looking for it, that helps us to know where to devote our energies to. So that's one thing. I don't know as we can promise much more than that. As you say, things for people entering the field. The DITA-OT documentation can't do all of that. But there is what is it, DITA training something or other content that I believe Sarah O'Keefe has started to put together.
It's ditatraining.org, I think, or something.
Right. So I think there are other initiatives out there around getting people up to speed with how to start working in this technology. And we can use some of that in the documentation, but I definitely view the DITA-OT documentation as how to use the DITA Open Toolkit, and we can't tell everyone how to use DITA, like in its entirety.
So that content Roger was talking about is available on GitHub as DITA source code also. So
I suppose that was my way of saying +1 to tutorial idea, right? And I fully agree. I don't mean to scope it as to teach people to use DITA. There are other resources, other places that people can sort of begin to familiarize themselves with that. And I know at least the training institutions in Finland do a reasonable job of sort of introducing people to that. But I was talking about explicitly about OpenToolkit, learning how to do plugins and customizations and constraints and all the things we've been talking about today, so that 5 years from now, when we have this conference again, right, George? We see a whole bunch of new eager faces in the audience.
Roger, were there any questions on Twitter for the panel?
or on the online meeting? I don't know.
Or the online meeting.
Many. Not many, but dispersed. Yeah, so this question about the EPUB 3. This question was about that the EPUB 3.0 needs to include XHTML in the specs. So I already posed it, yeah, about what Jano said about passing to HTML5.
So, I mean, the EPUB generating plugin already manages the details of the HTML it's generating. It depends on the XHTML transform, because that's where all the base stuff is. But I could just as easily depend on the HTML5 transform. But it's already making sure that the HTML files that are generated to go in the EPUB conform to EPUB 2 or EPUB 3 requirements. And that wouldn't change. I mean, Jarno can't break that for me, as much as he may want to try.
Okay, so you do the HTML to XHTML conversion as before that. I took half an hour more, just in case.
Half an hour more?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are not running out of time, but
yeah, the audience is tired.
We're running out of energy, maybe.
No, I mean, I'd really like to answer any questions you might have related to OpenToolkit.
Personal?
Yeah, those two. Sure. But if you don't have anything, we didn't really prepare a list of things. Like, I can start mumbling about the things I'm going to change or want to change, but I don't know if that's of interest.
Yeah, my main thing to ask people was the thing I've already asked you multiple times in order to get different answers. The other thing, I mean, just in general, I'm curious about what output formats you use, because, for example, we ship HTML help and Java help. Who here still publishes with Java help, for example? And I imagine that's not going to change as long as you're on 1.5. Yeah.
We're actually a large company with a lot of subsidiaries. So as those subsidiaries migrate to DITA, they come in with their own client base. And so we actually have some who want PDF, some who want Java help, some who want CHM. And then the main corporate global output format is XHTML, which Margaret just finished doing the CSS for and now learns she has to break it out into. So we provide a lot of output formats.
So who here uses HTML help apart from you? A few, not too many. I know, I mean, those have both been supported in IBM for a long time, and I was thrilled to see that no one was using Java help until I said, maybe we can take it away, and somebody said, no! So, yeah, but there are people using HTML help, not too many as well.
Yeah, so Java help is the only kind of offline help for Mac OS X right now. That's why we need it. We don't have any other kind of offline help for Mac OS X to embed in applications.
A suggestion from Scott of EPUB.
Maybe, but you need an EPUB reader installed. No.
No Java help. There is the built-in viewer within the Java virtual machine. No, because if you are a Java application, Rad was talking about Java applications.
Okay, time for George to drop the mic. We're done.
So I will be at the DITA Europe conference tomorrow and the day after. So if you'd like to talk to me there, just come and talk to me.
Same for me as well. Probably not during my session at DITA Europe, but otherwise, yes, please come up and talk. And I want to say again, thank you to George for arranging this. Thank you to Synchrosoft.
So I wanted to thank you because DITA OpenToolkit Day will not exist without Jan or Robert, and Roger with the developers. If they are not present, then you cannot have an event. So thank you.
Well, the panel would have been a lot less interesting, maybe.
And then DITA OpenToolkit Day will not be without you, people attending, so using the toolkit. So thank you for participating. And it will not be possible also without supporters, without my colleagues back home that, they when I say we'll do it again, and they say yes, okay. And so I want to thank again to Gnostics. Joe said, again, Ixiasoft also, the second year, they support us. Antenna House, they immediately also said we want to join that, and Context Services for helping us also with promoting the DITA OpenToolkit Day on the first page of DITA Europe, which is very nice, and thank you. So I think we are to the end of our day. So thank you again, and I hope we'll see you next year. And we plan to make recordings if they are, if we manage to record the sessions available, as well as the slides maybe in whatever formats they are.
We're also
after the conference. So you mentioned also about these sessions. So these sessions and last year's sessions are available. So all that information is still available if you want to go back to that.
So there was also some discussion about going out later for a drink if you want to join us and ask questions when we're a little more forthcoming. I don't know. We haven't picked a location for that, but we probably will at some point. And there's this thing called a tweet up, I think, Twitter or something. We'll probably post on there with the same hashtag to say where we're going or something like that. Or just follow us around for the next couple hours and then you'll end up there.
So we're going to organize a DITA flash mob.
Yeah. I did a flash mob, yes.
So thank you. And bye.